MysteryWire.com, home of the unusual and unknown. From Area 51 to the paranormal, it's your source to the most vetted UFO stories and special investigations in the world. Take a journey into the universe of MysteryWire.com.
So Cheryl, since we spoke to you last, you've embarked on this mega data project. Can you describe it and describe where you are?
What we have done is we've compiled all of the UFO data from MUFON and NUFORC 2001 through 2020. And we've gone through, we've cleaned up the spelling on the cities and corrected any counties that had to be reassessed. And we've added latitude and longitude information, that kind of thing. And basically what we can do is we're going to generate a second edition of the UFO sightings desk reference with highlights from all the states and the United States. And then what we hope to do, and we'll have all the piece parts to do it, we're going to go ahead and generate an individual book for every single state that literally drills down to the municipal level, the city level.
Oh my gosh.
And then we're going to do 5 books on shapes, okay, specializing in shapes, because we discovered during doing some of this that the shapes seem to have seasons. Who knew that, you know? And so we've got a lot of cool information to share.
So when this is done, assuming you're still alive, you will be able to, you have a reference for every city, every county, every state in the country.
3,100 counties represented, or county entities. There's a few counties not in there. Georgia was missing like 4 or 5. They got like 150. We have 20,300 municipalities. That's not everybody, but it's a lot.
And the input, the data, where does it all come from? All these UFO cases?
National UFO Reporting Center is about 60% of the data, and the Mutual UFO Network is about 40% of the data.
Let's talk about surprises so far. What we've discussed before what the potential impact of COVID would be. Everybody's at home, they're sitting around smoking cigarettes, looking at the sky at night. Was there any big surprises from the demographic changes that have happened to our country over the last year?
It fit the model. I've always said leisure time was a major driver, okay? And giving an example, we used January, February, and May as an average. There was an average of 875 per month, okay? March and April, during the lockdown, March was 149%, and April was 183%. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Then when we started seeing the ramp up of, this is a little harder to see, but when we started seeing the ramp up of COVID cases in the July, August, September, October, out towards the fall, we look at the national baseline. We see the national baseline coming up. Okay? A lot of people were they weren't going in the lockdown, but they were playing it closer to home, and we're seeing that evidence as well.
Any surprises in terms of types of UFOs that you hadn't seen as many before?
Yeah, we did. Triangles have fallen off. In fact, they were at the bottom of the list. Triangle UFOs were down 135 from the previous from 2019. Okay, cylinders, cigars, egg-shaped, fireballs. They all were in the negative. They were low. They were better in 2019 than they were in 2020. On the other hand, circles, spheres, changing UFOs, disc UFOs, tic-tac UFOs, teardrop, and Saturn-shaped UFOs were all on the rise.
Tic-tac UFOs?
Yeah, the ones like the Navy saw.
Yeah, they're up.
But they're starting to show up in things.
Did you have those before? I mean, in the years before Tic-tac was well known?
No, they only entered it into I think the National UFO Reporting Center put it in their list of shapes. In fact, I think I heard a lot of people were calling them up and insisting that they add it to the list of shapes. Also, another thing's been added. There's this National Electronics Magnetic Anomalies thing called MADAR. They get automatic feeds at National UFO Reporting Center from all the MADAR sites. There's like 200 of them out there, and they showed up over the last 2 years too. We got numbers for them.
Can you give me some sort of general across the board conclusions, what you're seeing from the data? I mean, in terms of, is the number of sightings and reports up everywhere, or are there places where they're down?
There's places where they're down. top of my head, I do not have who's it down with. But your market, the people from Mystery Wire, California was up 252 sightings over from 19. Oregon 131, Nevada 12. New Mexico was down 15. Texas was up 74. Utah was up 34. New York, you don't carry New York State. New York State was up 184. Washington State 165. They were some of the heavy hitters with the moving into 2020.
And did you tell me that the shapes themselves are seasonal?
Yes. We started back during the lockdown. I was playing with the data, and we were thinking of writing a shapes book at that time. And we started noticing when we started plotting like months and then over many months, we started noticing there was a repeating pattern. Sometimes a particular shape would only show up in the fall, it would only show up in the spring, or the spring and summer, that type of thing. And we put the whole thing on hold until we could correct all the city spelling situations. Really good resolution. And so when we do the shapes book, we're going to be able to show you what seasons they are.
And in winter, we're in winter now. Is there a decrease in places where it's really snowy and cold and people aren't outside as much?
Yes. If you're in like a northern state, I'm not talking Alaska. Alaska is its own animal. But if you're in a northern state, June, July, and August are like this, and the rest of the year there's just quiescent amount of sightings. If you move to a middle level state, we'll say Virginia, the Carolinas, that peak starts coming down and the rest of the numbers start averaging out. Okay. And then when you get to the deep south states, it's statistically flat. Okay. It looks like a picket fence. Okay. And it's statistically flat, except in a really deep south state like Texas or Florida, where it's really, really hot summertime, there's actually a dip because it's too uncomfortable to be outside. Now, we have a similar thing with Alaska. Everybody thinks, they had daylight all year round. But we found out that 60 to 75% of the sightings occur during hours of darkness. So for the 3 months of their all-day white nights, daylight, June, July, August timeframe, the sightings are bottoming out.
These numbers that you're sharing with us, they seem to say a lot more about us than about whatever it is that's flying around in the sky.
Yes, it's as much about human activity as it is, the UFO. I tell people, I think there's just a constant level of traffic up there, and we're outside, we're out doing things. The leisure time thing, people, it's after work, starts around 4:30 in the afternoon, goes to about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and most of it's happening around bedtime, 8:30 to 10:30. But we found out day of the week, 76% of the states, it's Saturday. But go to some deep south states, start showing up on Wednesdays and Thursdays. One of our interns looked at that data and says, well, I'm from down there. That's Bible study night. So again, a leisure time thing. Somebody's coming out from study in your car. Hey, look at that. That kind of thing.
And again, as we've talked about before, you're just dealing with the raw numbers, the reports that come in. You're not saying these are aliens or anything like that.
No. They're unidentified flying objects. It does not equal alien spacecraft.
So let's talk about a couple of places. How about how's Nevada, Las Vegas doing?
Las Vegas. Okay, Las Vegas. Oh, this is great. Okay, first thing I think we should mention is Phoenix is #1 city. Okay, second year in a row. New York City is #2. Okay, I never used to count New York City because it's 5 boroughs, and I tended to look at counties, but now we're counting them as a full city. They're #2. Las Vegas is #3 for sightings. Los Angeles is number 4. #6 is Portland. San Diego is #10. Houston is number 11 in the country. Albuquerque 13. Sacramento #20 in the country. 23 is San Francisco. Fresno is 43, and Lubbock is 275. But
I'm kind of surprised about San Francisco ranking that low, given how dense the population is there.
Yes, but when you compare it back against, again, we got that Los Angeles County phenomena, and there's a bunch of different things coming into play. We've determined that the drivers for all of this, back when we wrote our first book, we said it was population, temperate weather, leisure time. In the 2018 timeframe, we figured out the hours of darkness. Another major driver now we've uncovered, observer access to broadband. Okay. Now, in the secondary drivers, we have proximity to large bodies of water. That makes a big difference. People say to me, well, California's got big population. That's why they got all the sightings. Well, wait a minute. You go to Florida and Texas. Texas has more population. Florida has almost twice the sightings. Why? They got 5 times the coastline of Texas. Okay. We've got geological faults, toxic ecosystems, high visibility of the media. Whenever there's like a big flap, like the thing you had a week or so ago over New Mexico with the airliner, and that thing that went by, there's always a surge of sightings, and people say, well, I should report what I saw a couple of weeks ago. So there's a surge of that stuff. And then the last thing we have in the secondary drivers is a thing called the generational effect. Go to a place like Phoenix. They had the Phoenix lights 20 years ago. Okay. You go to Los Angeles, they had the Battle of LA in February 1942. Okay. So things seem to think there's this generational thing that, wow, grandpa and mom told me about this stuff that happened back then. If I look up regularly, maybe I'll see something, and that's what it seems to be. Also in the Los Angeles County, they've had UFOs up and down those canyons since the 1880s.
Back to this thing about water. What are you suggesting there? What is the data telling us? Is that these things are seen more prevalent around water, meaning maybe they're in and out of water, that they live there, they hide there?
Okay, 2 things. Yeah, yes, perhaps. And we hear that a lot from the people who study USOs, underwater, undersea UFOs. The other thing that happens there with the coastline things, now there's ocean coastline and there's Great Lakes coastline. I discovered this after the first book came out. I was doing a radio program one night. I had the book laying in my lap, and I'd never really looked at the map that I had put in there really close. And I noticed that if the states were touching the Great Lakes, the numbers were in the many thousands. 2001 to 2015 time, moved 2 states away, and it fell into the low hundreds. Okay, now there's probably a combination there. Those states are serious farming states. Again, there's a problem with not having rural broadband. Okay, and of course, then they're not next to a big body of water. And we think there's 2 issues. Are they hiding in the water? Perhaps. The other thing it seems to be is when you get around water, there's a bit different darkness there. You don't have as much light pollution, especially like out on a beach. Virginia Beach, we get sightings of the wazoo in Virginia Beach. I've been there before. Yeah, it's all lit up city, and then you go over here on the beach, it's all dark out there, so it's easier to see these things.
Let's go back to Las Vegas. So you said Las Vegas ranks number 3.
Or 3.
What other conclusions have you drawn from the data? What kinds of things are being reported here?
In Las Vegas, and the classic thing, a lot of lights in the sky type of thing. Shapes are being reported. Okay, I don't have the exact list of the shapes for Las Vegas, but it's a lot of shapes. I've looked at it very carefully. One thing we did notice with the hours of darkness chart we do, after 1 o'clock and after 12 o'clock, it falls off real steep. And then there's bumps overnight. Most states you go, the bump is at 5 o'clock in the morning when people start to see, take the dog out, go out and have that first smoke, go out and clean the snow off the car, that kind of thing. But in Las Vegas, there's a bump at 1, there's a bump at 2, and there's a bump at 4. And a MUFON investigator told me, oh, that's when the clubs and the shows let out.
Yeah.
Human activity again.
What about Houston, Texas?
Houston, Texas. Houston has definitely had a lot of sightings down there. I'll give you an example. Houston had 606 sightings. The state itself, and this is the 2001 to 2020 timeframe, Texas had 9408, okay? And just in 2020 alone, Texas had 572. That's a lot. They came in number 3, okay? And so it's a big deal. And Houston holds their chair.
Did you see a bump for Houston during the pandemic then, the lockdown?
I didn't drill it out. The whole country showed a bump. There's a couple of states that what I would call not the usual suspects for special stuff. I identified 6 this morning by accident that had more than their share in March.
Which ones?
Colorado And give me 1 second.
Right.
Colorado, Kentucky, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Utah, and West Virginia. Utah and West Virginia are places that like they're lucky to have one a week instead of like 6 or 8 in a particular day. That's a big deal. Okay, so we're going to be looking. I got another researcher by the name of Tom Conwell. I'm going to pass some of this off to him and see if he can make some sense of it.
San Diego.
San Diego. San Diego had 636 sightings in the 20-year period. And we're talking California had 1,184. It was number one again for 2020, and their 20-year total was 21,013. That's a lot. Again, people always point to California and say its population, and California is unique to itself. It's got 9 lines of latitude, so you got like 3 or 4 different climates going there. Population variations and things. A lot of it centers around LA and San Francisco.
And San Francisco, you said ranked where?
San Francisco,
20 or 23?
23. They're in the top 25 in the country.
Are they consistently there?
Presently, they're there. San Francisco has always been in the top 30. Best I remember, yes.
You mentioned about Utah, then I would guess that Salt Lake City was where most of the sightings come from, or not?
Yes, yeah, it dominates around there for the most part. Yes, Salt Lake City carries the load.
Do you happen to remember offhand? I know it's a lot of data, the kinds of things that they're seeing. Is there anything that jumps out at you?
It's a smorgasbord. You know, okay. you get one of the things we get a lot of, everybody saw a late sky or a star-like object. Okay, those things dominate the charts. And then if it gets to real specifics with a particular shape, then it breaks out. But usually a light sky that's doing funny things, dancing around, all kinds of stuff like that. That's what most people see.
One of our broadcast affiliates, our partners, is in Portland. What do you see in Portland?
Portland was wild this year. Portland was number 6. Last couple of years, it was bit on the lower side. It was like 10 or 12, that type of thing. They carried just the city alone carried 712 of Oregon's. 712 of Oregon's 42, 41, 20 years. That's a big deal.
Albuquerque,
New Mexico. It was ranked number 13. Again, it's in the top 15, and they had 541 for the 20-year period. But they were the peaking. It all adds up.
It's all trending upward.
Yeah, for the most part.
Let's see. How about Fresno?
Fresno. That was interesting. They've got their share of sightings. But nationally, they're only ranking about number 43 in the country, but they're in the top 50. You know, they are in the top 50, which is a big deal because we're talking 20,300 municipalities that we've logged here. So being in the top 50, it's still kind of cool.
We have a lot of friends in Lubbock. What about Lubbock?
Lubbock, they pulled 77. Over the last 20 years. Texas has these really huge numbers, but Lubbock, they're in the top 300. They're like 275 in the rankings.
Then you said Phoenix is number 1 again for the second year in a row. What's going on there?
That's that same thing. You got the very, very clear weather most of the time there. That's a big deal. Warm weather, people are out. It's you got a very large population, all those major drivers, no water, you know, but they have other things going for them, and we think the generational effect has people looking up a lot, that type of thing.
So I know it's one of the top 10 municipalities in terms of population, but is this out of whack even for their size?
Yeah, because if you look at it from the county, remember that Maricopa County is huge. Okay, Maricopa County has more sightings for the last 20 years than 30 individual states. Los Angeles County, everybody tells me light pollution, how can they see things? But Los Angeles County, not the city, has more sightings than 39 individuals did. So there's something really special going on there.
Give me big picture conclusions that you might draw from looking at all this data. I know it kind of overwhelms you. It overwhelms me just hearing some of it, but what's going on in the big picture in terms of if they are visitors from somewhere else? You thought they're always here and it just depends on us looking up and seeing them, or is there anything else that's going on?
Okay, I've remarked to people that I believe there's regularly scheduled flights. Okay, there seems to be. Remember a couple of years ago, there was a guy in Colorado used a special time-lapse video camera, and he was photographing objects coming in. And he said, like every day about 1 o'clock, there was this down. Of course, it was outside of our frame of vision. You know, that's what I've seen several evidences of that, and that suggested this idea that maybe they got casual flights. They look like us, and they visit us a lot and like to watch the humans. In that same context, the bigger picture. I've always told people there's a 6 to 8 year cycle, goes up and goes down, goes up and goes down. And I had some pushback on that issue. So this time when we were gathering our data, we went back, pulled additional information. People kept saying, why didn't you go back 40 years? Okay. The real sighting numbers didn't start till about 2001 because of access in most metropolitan areas to broadband. It tracks with broadband availability. And we went back 40 years in 1960 and did a chart of 1960 to 2000. The numbers are considerably smaller, but that little humpy thing with the little snake going across the Latin grass was the same. And then as you roll in to 2001 to 2020, the numbers are much bigger, but it's the same sort of a humpy thing. And back in 2017, 18 time frame, I said, oh, Cheryl, Space Force has chased the aliens away. The numbers are falling off, and Pete Davenport was saying, oh, the government or somebody shut off all the stuff coming to us. And I kept telling everybody, this is a natural cycle. Trust me, they'll be back. And I took a hiatus during 1990 because nothing was going on. But you called me and told me in early 2020 that something was going on. We got in there, and it's the best year since 2020, it's the best year since 2014. And they're coming back. And we built a model right after you had me take a look at it. I built a model, and we came out that we said there probably was going to be about 168,000 sightings, plus or minus a small percentage. And our model worked out very well. It came up to 167,632.
Wow, that's pretty close to what you predicted.
Yeah.
When you have an obvious answer to a UFO sighting report, say Starlink, Elon Musk's Starlink. We had a couple of weeks ago, a local TV station, not us, that was kind of freaking out. What the heck was this in the sky? And what they're describing as Starlink is one of Elon Musk's string of satellites.
Little chain of lights. Yeah.
Are you getting those reports?
Oh, we saw them in the Newfork data for sure. And
what do you do with that when you know what it is? Do you exclude it or you include it?
No. We roll. I've talked to a lot of people at MUFON and things, and we just roll it into the overall baseline of data, and we accept the fact that some smaller percentage of these things are really more what we should be interested in. Dr. Valet says maybe 20%. So, MUFON people say about 30% we should be serious about. Other people say maybe 10%. I've done calculations on each of those. But the deal is that some smaller percentage is what we need to be looking at.
So tell us again when the big project will be ready to relaunch, the expanded, updated version of your book, the desk reference, and then tell us who will use this data, who can use it and how. Okay,
the 2020 edition of the UFO Sightings Desk Reference, United States of America, 2001 to 2020. We refer to as Project Pink Book, and kind of a salute to Project Blue Book, so to speak. It's coming out in late April, maybe, but probably in early May, where it's going. I built the project around that, so I'm working to a schedule. So that will be the big one, and that will be like a really good analysis of the material for what all these numbers have taught us over the years. I'm being a big nice big journalistic write-up in there about this with charts and graphs and all kinds of illustrate all this stuff. And then we'll be doing numbers for the United States, like top 25, top 50 numbers type of thing. And then we'll do a summary for each state with a drill down to each town and to every county in the country.
So any journalists who want to report on UFO sightings in their area, it's broken down by city, county, state, shapes and types and sizes, time of day, all that data, right?
I've offered to a couple of people and they laughed me off the phone. You would think with all the stuff that's happened with the Navy, we got Senator Rubio's clock ticking on the secret agencies. We're going to know something here in a couple of months. In fact, we're racing to get this thing done before that happens. And it's troubling that so many of our journalistic colleagues are still drinking the Kool-Aid from the CIA from the late 60s. And that's what it seems to be. They don't want to talk about it. In fact, a local paper here, I offered them a really cool story. I gave them New York State down to the county level. I even gave them a PDF drilling down to the municipal level in New York State. That's a heck of a story, okay? And they ignored me, and their own reporter just pulled some new numbers up there and put it up, and that's the article. And it only tells about a third of the story. And the goofy thing about all of this is when you look at the sheer, maybe they don't want to scare the readership, because we had some pretty incredible numbers going right down the thruway in New York State, right through the middle of the state. And it was interested. I even went to a couple of NPR stations that did all the talk to Ralph Blumenthal and Leslie Kean back during the December of 2017, and offered them a thing, cricket.
Well, it's sometimes my colleagues have to be dragged kicking and screaming to pay attention to this topic and the data. But the kind of project that you're putting together, I think it's going to be a great resource. And when they eventually get their heads together, it'll be there waiting for them.
We had a joke with somebody the other day. If we had published all this data we've got, especially in a format, right down to the city level, if we did it as the desk reference, it would have been the size of a couple of Oxford dictionaries. It would have been almost 6,000 pages, too big to publish, obviously. And so that's why we decided to break it down to individual states. But the fact that this will be the largest collection of analyzed UFO data in human history, Linda and I basically have taken the attitude, well, some college give us a PhD for our work. The other thing too has been academics. We've reached out to a number of academics here in New York State, and it's Galileo syndrome. They don't want to look at it. They don't want to even take a presentation. Oh my God, if we show us the presentation, then we might have to believe in this stuff. No, we can't talk to you. And that's what it's been. And I've been beating my head against the wall for 2 years trying to get any academics to come give a presentation like I do at the UFO conferences. I'm not interested. Oh, can't do.
It does feel the world is changing a little bit on this subject matter, which, as you mentioned, the U.S. senators expressing an interest in it, the UAP task force being created. Who knows what else might be just around the corner, but I appreciate all the work you've done. We'll talk to you soon when it's ready to go. And thanks as always.
Anytime, George.
I think